the stories, the journey, the wild behind the scenes, and much more. I'm Dave Anthony, and I'm the host of From Garage to Stadiums. The Peter Grant, you mentioned him, and he's a fascinating character, a fearsome character, actually. Tell us a little bit about how he learned his craft, because it's quite a story.
Yeah, he worked for Ozzy Osbourne's father-in-law, who Don, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, but
Sharon. Oh yeah, what was her name? I can't remember. But anyways, Don. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was a thug. You know, the Ozzy's father-in-law was a thug, but he controlled all the bands that were coming out and the American bands that had come to the U.S. To perform, like Jerry Lee Lewis, like Little Richard, like Gene Vincent. And his road manager for these tours was an enormous 300-pound guy who was really just another thug, an ex-wrestler named Peter Grant. And Peter was a no-nonsense guy. He wouldn't take crap from anybody. You didn't want to give him crap. And he ruled these road shows with an iron fist. I have to say that Peter was a difficult guy, and at the end of my book, not a likable guy, but he really gave Led Zeppelin everything that they were looking for. He never cheated them. He was on he made sure they always got their money, because a lot of these British acts that came to the States would play a gig and then not be able to get their money from the promoters. The promoters would say, "Hey, tough, sue me." You didn't say that to Peter Grant. Peter would have pulled a gun or at least put a guy up against the wall. Always got paid for Led Zeppelin. He never took a cent more than he should have, which was an anomaly for British managers. And really made sure that they were taken care of on the road.
Right. And there is an interesting element that Peter Grant also brings ultimately to this story, which is when Led Zeppelin is at the top of their game, he changes the whole gate economics of the concert business based on Led Zeppelin's popularity. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, Dave, actually, they weren't even at the top of their game. It was just that Peter Grant was going to change how rock and rollers were paid. In the early days, if they played an arena, the split was 60-40. The promoter got 60, and the rock and rollers would get 40% of the gate. Peter realized that he could walk into any place, just announce on the radio that the band was there, and they would fill the stadium. And so he said to the promoters, "We'll give you 90%. We're taking 90%.
Yeah.
And we're going to give you 10% of the gate. Take it or leave it." And he changed everything for every single one of the acts that followed Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, brilliant. The next album comes out, Led Zeppelin II, and it has, I mean, this is now lightning in a bottle. It's got a whole lot of love, Thank You, Heartbreaker, Living, Loving, Ramble On. Many people have said, to the dismay of Jimmy Page, that this was the beginning of heavy metal. How does Page react to that comment?
Yeah, Page wasn't happy about that. He didn't like the term. He didn't want his music pigeonholed. He just wanted you to take it as it came. But, that's the whole thing about Zepp and the way they wanted to be seen. And the answer is tough. One of the problems that Zepp had was that they wanted to control everything. And really, they controlled, in the end, very little about their destiny. They complained all the time that they weren't taken as seriously as other bands, and that they couldn't get the kind of press that, say, the Rolling Stones got. The reason is this. I have occasionally walked down the street in New York City with Keith Richards, and when fans see him, they run up to him and they go, Keith, Keith, and he takes a picture with them. He puts his arm around them. He takes his skull ring off. He hands it to them to put on and try. If you had tried that with Jimmy Page, you would have had your arm broken. And so Led Zeppelin had no kind of affinity with their fans. They didn't want to be around their fans. They didn't like the press. They didn't give interviews. If they did give interviews, they refused to say much. And so they were always crying that they were called heavy metal, that they weren't taken seriously, and that they got no press. And that was the problem. They didn't treat the press and their fans very well.
Grant was one thing he did that was very savvy from a marketing perspective. You mentioned a couple of the things, but one is these guys made no television appearances. So if you wanted to see them, you had to attend the concert, buy the albums, which leads to more grossing gates receipts, ultimately plays out with, significant demand for these concerts. And these guys are literally the kings of the court when they travel and on tour. There's a significant amount of debauchery discussed on these tours.
Really?
They almost wrote, I think, the rock and roll manual to it.
Well, they were the first people that threw televisions out of the hotel rooms, and when they got to places like the Continental Hyatt House in Los Angeles, the lobby was filled with young girls. When I say young, we always say that there were like 15 and 16-year-old girls there, but they were 12 and 14 as well. And normally, the rock and roll bands that came through there would ignore these girls. They'd go to their room. Not Led Zeppelin. To Led Zeppelin, it was like a feast. And these young girls became a part of the Led Zeppelin story. It's not a pretty part, and it's a part that I have to temper in the book because I met a lot of these young women, now in their 50s and 60s. And they gave me the rundown of what exactly was going on. In fact, Led Zeppelin made them available to me. The stories that they told me made the hair on my arms stand up. Look, I'm a father of a young woman. I had been on the road with, rock and rollers. I know what goes on there, but I had never heard stories like this before. And they were hair raising.
Yeah. Shocking to say the least. We'll leave that so that readers will run out and get the book to hear more.
Yeah.